Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce today's webinar on the topic of online and hybrid language service delivery initiatives. My name is Carolyn Langdon, and I'm Senior Director, Programs and Services at Achieve, a charitable organization in the Greater Toronto Area, providing language, newcomer, employment, women, and youth services. And joining me today are three of my colleagues from Achieve: Marcia Perry-Folks, Senior Director, Program and Services; Jennifer Tanujaya, Manager, Assessment Tool Development; and Rafa Khan, Project Manager, National Link Online Curriculum. There are 5 initiatives that we'll cover over the next hour: hybrid language assessment services, online self-assessment, Link Home Study, specialized language training for the workplace, and National Link Online Curriculum. The initiatives that we're covering today collectively support the stakeholders represented on this page, from funders to partners and of course to end users. And our solutions demonstrate the need to adapt to address their evolving needs. At the end of the presentation, we will take your questions, but please feel free to add them to the Q&A feature in PeedLoop throughout our presentation. So now I will hand it over to Marcia Perry-Folks to discuss the hybrid language assessment services.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolyn, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Great. Thanks, Carolyn. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our language assessment services that we deliver at Achieve. And we've been doing administering language assessments and developing tools since 1992. And our services are primarily, our language assessments are intended to help newcomers and immigrants who are interested in learning or improving their English and or French. And once they are assessed by us, they are then referred on to language training programs that are generally funded through LINK, ESL, etc. The language assessments centers that we operate through Achieve are funded by IRCC and MLITSD in Ontario, and our target is generally 22,000 clients annually. Our assessments are delivered both in person and online. Next slide, please. The tests that we administer are based on the Canadian language benchmarks, the national standard, so both CLB and CLC. We assess skill areas: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And following the language assessment, we use a holistic approach to the referral to language training by looking at the best fit. And so we look at their results, but we also look at other needs. Do they need childminding? Do they prefer evening or weekend classes? Do they prefer in-person or online? Do they need transportation support, and so on? A range of tools are used by our language assessors, and these are tools that are generally delivered on site at a language assessment center location. So clients generally travel to the sites to access their language assessments, and we have teams of certified assessors who have been trained on these tools, both by our Achieve Assessor Training Services, as well as our partner, the Centre for Canadian Language Benchmarks, the CCLB. The client experience is most important to us, and especially as we talk about hybrid language assessment and referral services, we never lose sight of the importance of the human touch. At the language assessment centers, there are particular service activities that take place there, including the need to determine the eligibility of the clients, administer the actual language assessment, provide them with training options that meet their needs, and then refer them on to our several language training partners across the communities in which they live, as well as online options. The range of options that we refer our clients to include, the federally funded language training programs, including LINC, CLIC, OSLT, ELT, as well as for Ontario, provincially funded programs, ESL, FSL, SLT, specialized language training programs, etc. And so this slide for us tells a story, like many of you, I'm sure today, of how services were impacted or continue to be impacted in light of the COVID on our services. And so in 2020, April of 2020, or in-person language assessment services were temporarily halted due to the fact that our service site locations had to be closed. And at that moment, we had to immediately find solutions to ensure service continuity. At this stage, at the time of putting this data together for this presentation, we can see that for November and December of 2022, we have now moved into the recovery phase and in fact have started to surpass the previous highest year of 2019 prior to the pandemic. So suggesting that in addition to seeing recovery in terms of adapting our services, we're also seeing more clients. And so how did we adapt services with that sudden, interruption in March, April of 2020? So we recognized that we needed to find a way to continue to serve clients while our offices remained closed. This necessitated really taking a fresh look at the way that we were serving clients previously, which made it necessary for them to travel to one of our sites in order to access their language assessment. It was a demonstration of the stakeholders of the language sector really coming together at that critical time to find solutions. We worked closely with our funders, language assessment center administrators, the trainers through Achieve, language assessor training support services, as well as the Center for Canadian Language Benchmarks, the CCLB, and larger national advisory groups. The result of that collaboration and intense work was the development of what would be interim online language assessment tools and procedures. And so these interim online tools and procedures listed here included the CLBA Canadian Language Benchmarks Assessment Online, the CLB PT Unproctored, and these are tools both developed by Achieve as well as the Center for Canadian Language Benchmarks. But in terms of what impact it had on our services, it for the first time enabled clients who had the digital capacity and resources to be served from home. In other words, they no longer had to travel to a physical service center in order to access their assessment and be quickly referred, or as quickly as possible, referred to their language training class of choice. These measures that were implemented during the pandemic, as we resumed in-person services, it became evident that clients wanted to have that continued flexibility to decide whether going to a language assessment center in person was better for them, which some did and will continue to need, or was it more convenient for them to be able to just call in, book their online appointment, and be served from the convenience of home. So we've been doing ongoing surveys of our language assessment center clients. And the most recent one in January of 2023, we could see the continuing trend of roughly 70% continuing to prefer that option. However, in terms of, some of our ongoing observations and the impact of our service delivery ongoing, we have, out of necessity for efficiencies, continued to deliver 80% of our language assessments in person because we've learned that it's still more efficient to do that, and 20% of our assessments online, though the client demand is clearly showing that having more efficient online solution might be beneficial. And so it gives us some work in the sector to continue to look at how that particular piece will evolve. We also learned that the logistics of serving clients online required a lot more, the technology costs, staffing, resources, all of these have resulted in us, as I mentioned, continuing to optimize service delivery with our in-person piece while recognizing, the importance of enhancing those online tools. Overall, before I hand it off to my colleague, I would say that main pivot during the pandemic to adapt our services to serve clients from home was a great example of the language sector coming together to shift and seek solutions that continued to evolve and make sense for the needs at the time, but also to show the continuing need to further enhance our online tools. And at this stage, I will hand it over to my colleague, Jennifer Tanajaya. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the online self-assessment. Now, the online self-assessment, it does encompass both English and French. So you'll see the acronyms CLB-OSA, which is the Canadian Language Benchmarks Online Self-Assessment, as well as NCLC-AEL, which is the Niveau de Compétence Linguistique Canadienne Auto-Évaluation en ligne. So OSA, it's basically a free web-based self-assessment tool, and it was designed to determine a benchmark range in the receptive skills. And it's to help inform individuals and learners on their language learning path. So the assessment tool, like I mentioned, is both available in English and French, and it provides immediate benchmark results that can be used to direct the course of language learning. Now, the earliest iteration of the online self-assessment began over a decade ago, with the first versions of the test developed, and it was initially implemented across Canada, and then later on it was launched internationally. So you can see that there are many different countries that use the online self-assessment, and there are multiple users as well. So in addition to the benchmark section that provides a detailed explanation of the Canadian language benchmarks, the OSA website also contains province-specific a repository of information on immigration and settlement, ESL self-study materials, employment and credential evaluation information. So there's a lot packed in there, and that is accessed regularly by the users. Now, the main purpose of the online self-assessment is, of course, to inform the users of their general language proficiency, to give them an idea of how they're functioning. Also, is to raise awareness of the Canadian language benchmarks amongst the prospective immigrants, adult language learners, and also professionals who are supporting immigrants. And lastly, we want to inform or provide resources to inform users about the OSA as a tool for planning and making personal and career-related decisions. Now, when everything shut down suddenly in 2020, in order to meet the needs of the language assessment centers across the country, the Chief created an interim assessment procedure for use during COVID. Now, this was the first CLB-based assessment online that had elements without a proctor. So the informal CLBA OSA was developed using an adapted version of the CLBA speaking. Now, the CLBA is an existing assessment tool in use at in-person language assessment centers, and it was used in combination with the OSA, so the receptive skills of listening and reading. Now, a writing component was added specifically for use in the language assessment centers, such that clients would have all 4 skills. So basically, the results of the informal CLBA OSA were used for placement into language training classes during this period. And as Marcia noted, it has been extended until 2025. Next slide, please. So here is an overview of the assessment process for the informal CLBA OSA. It involves various connection points with the client via the OSA platform, as well as on Zoom. So the client and assessor are able to interact remotely, and by the end of the process, the client can be placed in an appropriate language training program. Now, one of the options, in addition to the online classes as well as in-person learning, is the Link Home Study. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Carolyn for more information on this program.
Thank you, Jennifer. The Link Home Study program is funded by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And the program provides language instruction for newcomers to Canada that face barriers to in-person classes, such as isolation due to lack of transportation to get to a class, a lack of available training in their geographic region, clients that are pregnant or have young children and no childcare options, clients experiencing health issues, maybe juggling employment responsibilities and other special needs. The program started as a pilot project back in 1995 with a small group of learners, and it has evolved over time in terms of the scope and delivery. And it's currently available to learners across Canada, with the exception of the province of Quebec. So what is Link Home Study? Link Home Study is an English language training program, and it's delivered at a distance to Link eligible clients with minimum benchmarks of 3.322, and that's for listening, speaking, reading, writing, and up to CLB 8. The learners must have access to internet or a computer or access to a phone. Access to internet and a computer or access to a phone. And our intake is continuous and all year long. The core model consists of a few elements. So there's the one-on-one instruction. Each learner is paired with an instructor. The instructor and the learner meet for 30 minutes each week, either by phone or by video conference. Then the learner is assigned homework to complete on their own each week. So there's a self-study component, and the expectation is that they complete at a minimum of 5 hours per week. And the learners can choose to study either online or by correspondence. So learners that choose the online option have accounts that are set up in order to access our learning management system. And that provides them with access to a self-directed course. And the learners that choose the correspondence option, they receive a physical book in the mail, and they have learning exercises and answer keys available to them within that book. And our instructors can supplement the core learning materials that we provide with other content based on the learners' needs and goals. So what makes this service unique are the choices available to the learners in terms of how to study and when to study, as well as the individualized instruction and support that they receive through this one-to-one model. What I do want to highlight is that this model also includes a dedicated team to support the technical infrastructure that the clients and the instructors are geographically dispersed, and our core team are supporting them in terms of their needs, in terms of technical and functional support. It's also interesting to note that roughly 60 to 70% of our clients are women. So women really benefit from this model, but this model is not for everyone. It's certainly an option for those that are unable to attend a regular class for the reasons previously shared. So now let's just take a look at some numbers. What I want to convey with this chart is that the need for the language learning at a distance isn't new. The barriers to accessing in-person services have always existed. But it was just a matter of acknowledging and starting to address that need, starting with the small pilot program in 1995. And then from there, the volume of clients grew. And the numbers that I'm sharing are for the province of Ontario. Just want to flag that. The program was introduced to other provinces and territories at different times. So in 2019, there were only a few LINC online learning options available because this was pre-pandemic. So we had high volume of unique clients that year. And then by 2022, in the sort of post-pandemic year, more online learning options were available, including group online learning options, which likely satisfied the need for more interactivity, making more interpersonal connections, which was likely desirable after the isolation experience during lockdown. So this impacted the volume of clients that we served. So now really post-pandemic, it's not only the barriers to in-person classes that are motivating clients towards online services, but also personal preferences and just the convenience. And looking at delivery options and evolving needs, in 1995, there was no online option available, just correspondence. And the online option was added around the year 2000 when e-learning was really cutting edge. And at that time, it was transformational. It was a transformational change for the program. And it took several years to build the resources and the infrastructure to deliver the program online. But as you can see, we still haven't completely abandoned the correspondence option. And sometimes online just is not the right solution. So just as an example of leveraging correspondence, we were able to assist 2 incarcerated clients last year because we had this model in place to support language learning at a distance through a paper and pencil method. So we adapted our existing correspondence option a little bit to meet this unique learning scenario. So that being said, the online option is certainly for us the more efficient option operationally compared to the correspondence option. And it is where we invest most of our time and effort when it comes to continuous improvement. And the changes that we make do tend to be incremental. So we tweak elements of the program based on stakeholder feedback, and we make we try to make the delivery more and more efficient online. So, you know, when there's a change that's requested or a change to be made, we usually size up the proposed changes and consider whether it can be implemented incrementally or gradually, or whether it would entail a more radical change. So when it comes to radical change, the crisis of the pandemic was transformative for the sector that relied primarily on face-to-face training courses. And the need for online delivery was catalyzed by the lockdowns. So it's exciting to see that online learning is receiving as much consideration now as in-person learning. And now there's, of course, a greater volume and variety of online and hybrid classes available for learners to choose from. And the need that previously existed for the flexible anytime, anywhere learning and individualized support has not gone away. So overall, LINC learners generally, they benefit from the broader spectrum of options available to address their unique and evolving needs. And on that point, we are going to look at meeting the needs of the food service industry. So I'd like to please welcome back Marcia Perry-Folks to speak about specialized language training for the workplace.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, so as Carolyn mentioned, the continuing interest in relevant training is something that we continue to hear more and more from our clients who access language training. And employers have become more of a focus as far as ensuring that we're also meeting their needs. The project that I'm going to share with you is an example of a specialized language training for the workplace course project that was funded by the Ministry of Labor, Immigration Training and Skills Development. And it was intended to support the settlement and language training sector, build capacity to deliver more employment-focused language training and supports. It involved collaboration with key partners, so industry, and we also we developed interactive customized solutions that would be integrated into curriculum to support language learners who are at stage 1 and 2, so CLB 2 to 4. Ultimately, the beneficiaries would be newcomers coming to Ontario who are working in or seeking employment opportunities within the restaurant, hotel, and motel industry. One of the priorities that this type of project tries to address is the labor shortage. And employers express to us the need to find ways to better promote the opportunities that actually exist in the hospitality sector. And it was shared with us that newcomers or immigrants may not necessarily be aware of the opportunities to not just enter and work in the hospitality sector, but to actually advance and grow. Next slide, please. And so to have this project really represent a stakeholder effort, we worked closely with the Toronto Catholic District School Board and New Language Solutions, as well as the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association. And we also worked with instructors who would be delivering this customized interactive curriculum to learners. But most importantly, we got input and feedback on what would be developed from the learners themselves, from our adult language learners. The Toronto Catholic District School Board and New Language Solutions provided us with technical guidance to facilitate this content creation on Onyx. And it was really important for us that we created not just, information, PowerPoint slides. And so we wanted to make sure that it was interactive and engaging and broken down in ways that made it most relevant and addressed some of the key needs that we heard from our employer partners. ORMA provided the industry expertise, again, focus on relevance. And it was a wonderful opportunity to work with ORMA, who has over 11,000 businesses, members, employers, and they helped us to facilitate focus groups, deliver surveys to members, and really engage with us along the way to inform the content that would be developed and delivered. The instructors that we worked with, were primarily through school boards, already delivering ESL, workplace-specific language training, and they were able to have their learners pilot some of the content for us. Next slide, please. And so the end result of working with our stakeholders, getting our technology in place, using the latest with guidance from our partners. The topics, the e-units that we created covered off some of the basics that were identified as some of the areas that need some more focus and enhancement for learners, but also then adapted, customized for the specific needs of language learners. And some of the topics included working in the food services, communication in the workplace, infectious diseases, allergies, pathogens, food safety, health, safety, and workplace law, job readiness. And the end result was that the e-units were then put on a learning management system platform where instructors will have ongoing access, and countless learners annually will benefit from that now being added to the suite of curriculum content for those who access these workplace language specific courses. In terms of process or overall process, evaluation, and lessons learned, again, having informed material developed was critical for us. And so we, from the very beginning, had established an advisory committee of employers, instructors, technical experts, learners. And for our team, it was an ongoing learning opportunity ourselves around the technical aspects of what was needed working on new platforms, identifying what would be the best, way to develop the content to align with the platform that we were required to use, and so on. In terms of content planning, the material was very much influenced by the feedback from the employers and the specific areas that they felt would support their needs as well as those of the learners. We piloted the content and improved on the information and the format based on feedback from the learners and instructors themselves. And overall, the feedback that we got from employers is that they appreciated the time, really focusing on getting their input as well, and the need to attract more into that particular sector, the food services sector, but also to, seeing this curriculum exercise, this project as an opportunity for them to also promote, okay, so why would a newcomer be interested in entering this sector, but what are the advantages, what are the opportunities to build on? For learners, they generally responded well to the curriculum, and of course, it just continued to emphasize what we see as growing need by our clients, not necessarily to sit in classes, but they're looking more and more for language training opportunities that may give them, actual workplace specific skills and give them that extra push to move to the next step. And at this point, I will now hand it over to my colleague, Rafa Khan. Thank you.
Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. So it's actually my pleasure to introduce you to the National Link Online Curriculum and PBLA project. So this is a 5-year project that started in April of 2020. And in the project, we're actually developing a number of Link Online courseware units for learners in CLB levels 3 to 5. So as you may likely know, LINC stands for Language Instruction for Newcomers to Canada. The objective of the project, it's for instructors to have easy access to online e-units that they can adopt and then deliver to their learners, so their LINC learners. And we're talking about e-units with content that's aligned with portfolio-based language or portfolio-based learning assessments, as well as the Canadian language benchmarks. So that would include, skill areas like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And this is ready to use for service provider organizations, basically anytime, anywhere. So in terms of the number of courseware e-units we are building, we've got 75 slated across CLB levels 3 to 5. And they will be available on Avenue in 2025. So more specifically, we're working on 25 CLB3 e-units, 35 CLB4 e-units, and 15 CLB5 e-units. And then for those of you who may not know Avenue.ca, that is the learning management system and that we're working with, and it's overseen and delivered by New Language Solutions, or NLS. So this is where all of our courseware units will live. And so far, New Language Solutions has been the organization to help us with all of our course integrations so far, as well as user testing on the platform. In fact, New Language Solutions has supported us with the delivery of some test e-units from the very beginning. So we call this user acceptance testing, and we've had 3 different or independent rounds of user acceptance testing. So it's a big project. So in terms of support, it's one that is funded by IRCC. It's managed and owned by Achieve, of course, and it's supported by the Center for Canadian Language Benchmarks. We're wrapping up our 3rd year of this project in March, and we're busy with the development of e-units. So like I said, the complete and the formal launch of all courseware e-units will be live in 2025. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the features and what makes it relevant. And, it really is a relevant project because it's a curriculum that's ready-made. So what this means is it's a complete curriculum and it can be used by teachers, and the e-units have everything needed that would fulfill a learning journey. So it's designed intentionally so that units can be completed independently as desired, but also teachers can feel free to go through the units with their learners in a hybrid or face-to-face model. So point 2, it's CLB aligned and it's PBLA compatible, which means that the content incorporates features of portfolio-based language assessments, and all units that we have portray true scenarios with real-world tasks, and these real-world tasks are connected to community, study, and work-related situations. So this would mean that we have themes in units that are relevant to the 21st century, like banking and professional connections. So 3, it's structured and versatile. So each unit is set up with sections to give it its structure, but at the same time, it's versatile because it can be used as that self-directed model where it's done asynchronously or in part of a blended or hybrid model or in a face-to-face environment. And then 4, we've got inclusive content. We have specialized content. So we've done indigeneity, francophone communities, and inclusivity, as well as cultural competency. So for example, learners will see content regarding indigeneity, francophone communities, LGBTQ 2S+ communities. They'll see some content on mental health. They'll see wellness incorporated. And really, all of these skills help beyond language learning. And it kind of goes and forays into critical thinking, as well as sociocultural skills. Then we've got accessibility and interactivity as features. So, accessibility is a very strong priority for the project. And so to make sure that our e-units being held or housed online are accessible to everybody, we did accessibility testing last year to identify some of the adjustments that we should make in order to make our current e-units more accessible. So for example, some of the feedback includes, if we have videos, to provide transcripts, to make sure we are adjusting the font and size of text so that it is visible for wider audiences, and we include audio also for instructors. So those are just a few to name. Now the content is also interactive, and that is because of the breadth of authoring tools that we've used to create some different activities. So just for a small example, we have quizzes, we have record audio as a feature where the learner can really record themselves and listen to them. We have videos, and of course, there's more than that. And finally, we have digital literacy and critical skills. These are woven into all of the e-units. So an example of digital literacy would include searching for information on a search engine, for example. Another example of critical skills would be finding information on a website. So these are some of the real-world tasks and topics that are covered throughout the courseware units in the curriculum. All right. So although the National Link online curriculum and PBLA project is one that's ongoing, we do have some measures set up along the way to assess whether our team is able to deliver on the projected outcomes and the goals. So first and foremost, we have set up a stakeholder advisory group with Link experts located across the country. Now, every step of the way, be it research, planning, development, or testing, we've approached our advisors to determine whether certain ideas would be favorable to incorporate into the project or into the courseware. We've also sought ideas and recommendations from the group. So when we plan testing, we engage this group to think about important feedback questions for our test learners and instructors that in turn would help us modify and improve our courseware. So this is actually a pretty good segue to the next point, because to date we have launched 3 independent user acceptance tests to link instructors who are active on avenu.ca. So in testing, instructors have access to NLOC, so that's National Link Online Curriculum. They have access to the courseware e-units to integrate into their classroom content. The testers have provided feedback to our team, which we have analyzed and applied to improve our courseware units wherever it's been possible. And in each UAT, we've showcased between 3 to 4 different e-units, including an orientation unit to generate some more feedback and to orient both our test users, but be it instructors or be it learners, to just make sure they are comfortable maneuvering through the different sections of the e-unit. Now, this process also helped to identify interview participants, and our interview participants have provided us with more detailed feedback to work on and then apply into our units overall. So far to date, we have heard how helpful the courseware has been in improving language skills and beyond, but we have also heard what features have bugs or glitches, for example, and this has really allowed us to make enhancements. Finally, I want to talk about a larger scale test that we have coming up. We'll be calling that the pilot. And in the pilot, the reason it's larger in scale is because we'll have many more e-units as opposed to the traditional 3 or 4. But these will be available on avenu.ca for instructors across the country to incorporate and then test within their course programming, so with their learners. This will be a really big test of our e-units. And of course, like with it being so large in scale, we will be receiving a lot more feedback to finalize and firm up each of our e-units. Okay, so I talked a little bit about process measures, but I want to elaborate a little bit about some of the things we have heard to date and how we've implemented the feedback into our courseware. So in the early days of the project, so 2021, you could say, we solicited feedback from language learners and we inquired about the type of visuals, for example, that they might want to see in our courseware. So this informed us of learners' preference of visual supports. And since then, we have integrated this into our content and design. Similarly, we also solicited feedback about some of the types of activities that might be preferred by English language learners and teachers. So we work with different authoring tools and programs, and with this, we've been able to make a range of interactive and engaging activities available in the courseware. So these are just a couple of ways in which an early focus group has helped us to decide on the best design scheme for our courseware. Now, feedback that came out of user acceptance testing, which I spoke to in the last slide, has only validated our decision to incorporate graphical illustrations, video, audio, and interactive activities. Learners and instructors who submitted feedback did point to the value of these features, as well as some of the other bugs and glitches, for example, that I spoke to you about. Likewise, feedback from the user acceptance test also revealed to us that our e-units are suitable not only for self-directed learning, which was the initial attempt and initial vision for the courseware, but it extends to language learners, and it's applicable to language learners who are in blended, hybrid, and in-person environments. So like I said, it was a narrower audience at first, but the great news is that with all of the e-units, it's great not only for asynchronous learners, but also for a range of language learners across a diversity of learning models. And last but not least, user testing and interviewing instructors. It's led us to identify some supports that can complement our courseware. And that is why we've also been working on building and enhancing the following features. So that would include e-learning unit summaries. And this can be thought as a lesson plan for instructors. We also have a instructor overview video, and we're now expanding that a little more just to make it a little mini series. And we also have an overview and Q&A document that we are thinking about launching as well for the curriculum, or a FAQ, if you will. We have a built-in orientation e-unit for learners so that learners can familiarize themselves with the NLOC curriculum. And so you can see there are a lot of measures to ensure that along the whole lengthy process of developing and testing and developing and testing, we are actually collecting and implementing the feedback so that we're able to improve the NLOC courseware e-units and most essentially meet the needs of instructors and learners who will be the ones to use the e-units. So that is a little, I guess, at a glance at the National Link Online curriculum. So at this point, I would like to turn it back over to Carolyn, and I think she will initiate us into question and answers.
Thank you, Rafa. Yes, that concludes our presentation. And now we've set aside time to answer any questions. So if I could ask the other presenters to also turn on their videos. And I will open the Q&A box to start with the questions. And I will sort the questions by, I suppose, the most up votes. And see what we have here. The first question, are you planning, it's dynamic. Okay, so the first question or comment, wonderful, good work. Do you run a digital literacy test? What is the criteria to be eligible for online learning? Do you have any digital skills outcomes? And in terms of the impact of hybrid online method of service delivery on digital skills like broader secondary outcome, clients improve digital literacy skills. Do you have any metrics that you could share with us? I imagine that is directed towards Link Home Study. So the short question, or sorry, the short answer is we don't have a standardized digital literacy test for our learners. There's sort of a self-selection process at a few points along the way in terms of intake. So at the language assessment phase in terms of their initial language assessment, in terms of identifying whether the learner is suitable for Link Home Study and whether they want to study online. So we do have that information available to us. And then once they join our wait list, we do ask them about their preference in terms of studying online or by correspondence. So again, they're self-selecting whether they are going to be learning online or by correspondence. Then our instructors, as part of their needs assessment, conduct their own digital literacy assessments. And to support them, with learners that do have lower digital literacy and have selected to learn online, we have supports available to the learners that are through group webinars and also one-on-one support in order to help them use our learning management system. So it's very task-specific support, so that they can build up their competency in terms of navigating our learning management system and completing their activities online. So very task-specific support that's provided. And do we have any metrics around improving digital literacy skills? We don't, but that's a good idea in terms of potentially adding a metric or some type of measurement around that as a secondary outcome for the program. So thank you for sharing that. It's an excellent idea. I'm just looking at another question here, upvoted, is, are you planning on developing special curriculum for other industries like you have done for the food service industry. At this time, there's nothing under development.
Carolyn, I
Yes.
could take that one if you like.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, yes, we are really pleased to share that we have been given additional funding. So we do have projects coming up to work with the trucking industry, as well as the Ontario Retirement Association, community associations, to develop curriculum that will further support some uptake, some interest in positions in the wonderful opportunities that are, there's a labor shortage in those sectors. But, and so, yes, we did receive some funds that's going to take place over the next 2 years, but it speaks to the ongoing need for more partnership with industry to support the labor shortage, but also to really flag and identify and promote the wonderful opportunities that are in these sectors. So yes, trucking and the retirement care sectors. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcia, for clarifying that response. Then we have another question regarding NLOC. Rafa, I don't know if you want to take this one with regards to the cost of accessing NLOC, if any.
Absolutely. So at this time, first of all, I should mention that if you are interested in testing, then you can access NLOC, but in general, there will not be any fee. There are some prerequisites though, and that would mean you would have to be a federally funded or LINC instructor. And not only that, but you do need access to avenue.ca because that is the only learning management system in which NLOC courseware will be available. But the thing is, in order to create an Avenue account, it's not very cumbersome. You actually need to get in touch with New Language Solutions. And the moment you have someone linked up, they will help you create an account and they will be the ones to guide you and take the training you need so that you can access the curriculum. I should also mention that the curriculum is accessible by teachers. So if you are a LINC learner, then really you would need to inform your teacher about this project and the courses that they might expect on Avenue to really gain access and use this as a learning tool. So I'm not sure, I guess, if it's coming from a LINC learner or a LINC instructor, but in terms of access, first and foremost, you would have to be in that instructor role to go into Avenue and see these courses.
Thank you, Rafa. The next question, do you find that certain client groups are more likely to opt for hybrid classes as opposed to pure online classes and vice versa? That's an excellent question. I'm not sure, Marcia, maybe do you have any insights from the assessment perspective in terms of referrals? And
certainly. So for generally, the clients who we have observed are more appropriately served in person at our language assessment centers are those who have literacy needs. They may also prefer simply to have the human touch. So they really need to speak to staff, but it really comes around the literacy levels. We serve at the language assessment centers clients who've recently arrived from other countries. They may be refugees. Some have families. And so they tend to, depending again on their education, their previous, educational level, level of English or French, or, previously, they're more appropriately served. They may not have access to the technology at home. They may not have access to computers, that sort of thing. And so they would be better served in person. Those that are more, and we actually use a digital screener at the Language Assessment Center to determine the appropriateness of whether an online versus an in-person assessment would be appropriate for them. And so through Jennifer's team, the language assessors are provided with a screener to determine, some of the things that would be flagged in that initial booking would be, do you have a computer at home? What was your last level of schooling that you achieved, and so on, just to make sure that those who are being served online are set up with the capacity or have support at home to be served for, virtually for that assessment, or if it would be more appropriate for them to go in person. The higher language level clients tend to be better, they have the option for in-person or online. And most of those clients who are coming in, we see 50 to 70% of our clients with some post-secondary education before they arrive in Canada. They love the online option and they will go for the online option. So that would be my contribution to that one. Thanks.
Next question. Do your instructors work from home or are they in a central work site? For the Link Home Study Program, our instructors, they work from home. I think that answers that question. Next question is the workplace-specific program delivered in collaboration with employers? Is it delivered in cohorts? Is it delivered through Link?
So that particular initiative that I described is intended for delivery by language instructors who are delivering ESL. And so that particular example is one of the Ontario provincially funded projects that would be part of the English second language curriculum stream. So these are learners that would register typically at a school board for language training. They would receive their language assessment from a language assessment center and then be, express interest in the industry and then be referred to that school to access that course. So it's primarily accessed by the learner who will go to an ESL funded organization delivering that curriculum.
Thank you, Marcia. The next question, can clients with CLB lower than 3 access the home study option? So the minimum benchmarks required are 3, 3, 2, 2. So 3 for listening and speaking and 2 for reading and writing. So I'll move on to the next question. Do you have any supports for immigrants who have difficulties accessing or using technology? And I think in our cases, they're very program or project specific in terms of the supports that we provide. They've been tailored, the supports specifically for the projects and the programs that we're delivering. And I'm not sure if the question is broader in terms of supports. Does anybody else have any comments in this area?
Maybe
Sorry, Rafa, go ahead.
I was just going to chime in and mention that for NLOC in particular, because it is hosted through avenue.ca, there are some trainings within avenue.ca which would allow the instructor or teacher to then help the student better maneuver the device that they choose to use and use Avenue in general. So we have seen that feedback come through in our UAT where teachers have mentioned to us that there are students that start off with some level of difficulty using technology or using Avenue for the first time, but as they have gone through the units and worked on them in tandem with their teacher, they have settled in and they are now more comfortable using the technology. And Marcia, I know you were going to chime in, so over to you.
Yes, from the language assessment centers in terms of supports, that would be one of the major considerations when determining the appropriate language training referral. So the language assessment center will refer to in-person or online options for a client who is having difficulty accessing or using technology. The language assessment center, the assessor would be looking at perhaps a local in-class option where the learner has the support on the ground, is able to go physically to the school and benefit instead of an online option being provided to them.
Yeah, and certainly for the Link Home Study Program, if accessing the internet or a computer is an issue, we of course do have still the correspondence option and also just support available for those who are more challenged in terms of navigating our learning management system, but do have access to internet and a computer or laptop to participate in the program. I'll take this. There's last question here appears to be that given that clients tend to prefer online training, will you focus more on online service delivery in the future or some sort of hybrid model? And I am not sure if this question is directed specifically at Link Home Study or NLOC, but maybe I will let Rafa respond in terms of NLOC and how this is being considered.
Sure, absolutely. So, our initial intention with the NLOC courseware e-units was that they can be adopted completely online in a self-directed environment, which is fabulous. However, after we've done the 3 rounds of testing, we are seeing that just as there is that target audience who's really interested in using the e-units for self-directed online learning, we have also heard from a number of teachers who conduct their classes in a blended environment. So that means sometimes their students are with them in person and other times they are connecting online and it's together. So, with that sort of feedback, it's clear to us that it's important for us to continue our efforts and move towards that hybrid model of delivery where we are accounting for both that in-person model as well as the hybrid and the asynchronous model. So I hope that kind of makes sense, but we're kind of trying to do a wraparound situation, if you will.
Thank you, Rafa. Adapting and evolving based on client feedback. No, I don't see any other open questions at this time. So I just would like to thank you for your time and the opportunity to share this presentation with you on behalf of all of the presenters. And wishing you a wonderful rest of your day and take care.